Para uma família de imigrantes, o sonho americano se torna um pesadelo. A morte ronda as fábricas, as prisões e os lares. O escritor Upton Sinclair arrisca sua vida para contar a verdade terrível dos manipuladores de carne de Chicago e as catástrofes alimentares que ameaçam nossas vidas ainda hoje.
He died, his insides shredded.
Sinclair expôs um inferno que não merecia ser chamado de civilização. Então ele decidiu batizá-lo com um outro nome: a Selva. Grandes Livros, TBA. A época é a virada do século, o século XX. O lugar, Chicago. Uma festa de noivado enche a atmosfera com os sons da esperança. A noiva é Ona Lukošaitė, uma bela jovem lituana. Ela e seus familiares se aventuraram em uma nova vida no mundo novo. O noivo é Jurgis Rudicus, um operário do antigo continente. Ona concordou em se casar com Jurgis se ele concordasse em mudar para os Estados Unidos. Os parentes do casal estão no meio da festividade. Marija, prima de Ona, é viúva e uma mulher inteligente. E Eitanas, o pai de Jurgis, está determinado a vencer trabalhando com carne. Todos são recém-chegados e esperam tomar parte no sonho americano. Mas, como vários convidados desesperados e desiludidos desta festa sabem, estes recém-chegados são meros sonhadores. E, tragicamente, eles estão prestes a despertar. A festa inicia o romance de Upton Sinclair, A Selva. Em A Selva, Sinclair atacou as empresas de manipulação de carne pelo tratamento desumano de seus operários num lugar infernal chamado Packing Town. Os norte-americanos ficaram ultrajados com sua descrição das empresas que contaminavam sua comida com doenças mortais. Eu visei o coração do público, Sinclair confessou.
When his book hit, it really hit. And it's one of those examples where ideas do make history.
At the time that The Jungle was written, the plants were horrible places to work. They were full of violence. They weren't clean. And frequently, diseased and dead animals were slaughtered and made into food.
It was a wake-up call for the country. It was also the right book at the right time in American history. Up to that point in time, the public hadn't really thought too much about the conditions of the meat that they were buying.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for The Jungle, because the American Meat Institute was founded right after The Jungle was published. So it had a huge impact on both the industry and the government.
Sinclair queria que o livro soasse como um alarme sobre a crise nesse setor que havia se iniciado no século XIX. A economia dos Estados Unidos tinha mudado da agricultura para a manufatura. O número de operários nas indústrias havia aumentado uma dezena de vezes. Atraídos por estes empregos, cerca de 9 milhões de imigrantes entraram nos Estados Unidos. Porém, o custo da alimentação e dos bens de consumo estava subindo e os salários baixavam. Desesperados por trabalho, os imigrantes assumiram empregos que ninguém queria.
Imagine the kind of picture they had of America. And after seeing that beautiful Statue of Liberty, then they end up in slaughtering houses in these dark, dank places with the butcher knives slashing dead meat. So it was always the first immigrant off the line at Ellis Island that ended up in these plants.
Think about an individual coming from a rural agricultural kind of society, whether you think about Jurgis coming from Lithuania or a black migrant coming from the deep south, Mississippi, coming into a large industrial city, working in a mass production industry like meatpacking. Sinclair was writing on the crust of a giant wave of social and economic change that took place in the course of the late 19th century.
In these chutes, the stream of animals was continuous. It was quite uncanny to watch them pressing onto their fate, all unsuspicious, a very river of death.
Graças ao seu tamanho, Jurgis Rudicus, o herói de A Selva, facilmente vence o primeiro desafio em Packingtown. Ele consegue um emprego. São muitas horas de trabalho. O salário é miserável e o lugar devastador. Quando um operário fica doente ou se fere, ele é deixado de lado. E centenas de homens desempregados brigam para substituí-lo.
Those slaughterhouses in Chicago, they really are a picture of Hades, picture of hell. It was live or die, sink or swim. So the deadened conditions in the slaughtering house and that death that permeated also permeated the battle between the owners and the workers. But in this case, the masters and the slaves, because the conditions there were really slave-like conditions.
Jurgis suporta as adversidades sem reclamar. Logo ele começa a pagar por uma casa modesta para Ona, Eitanas e Marija. Em sua nova casa, os imigrantes compartilham as histórias dos horrores de Packingtown.
There is a government inspector in the butcher line, but he is easy to lead the way for a cup of tea or a smoke. Then the foreman brings the sick cows in, cows that are pregnant, animals with broken backs and broken legs, cut with horrible diseases I've never seen before. By the time the government inspector comes back from his tea, we are done with our dirty work.
So literally, it was caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. It was wide open. There was absolutely no safety controls in place whatsoever. You could virtually do whatever you wanted in that factory. It was out of sight, out of mind.
O pai de Jurgis, Eitanas, limpa o chão de um matadouro. Ele relata como a sujeira do chão é vendida como carne enlatada.
The drains can't keep up. That's where I come in. I run around the butcher's table with my broom. Old man, over here, they shout. When the gore at their feet gets too deep. But the funny part is, the drains don't go nowhere. There's a cage below the floor that catches all but the smallest bits. Where do the bad parts go? I put them in a barrel for canned meat.
Upton Sinclair went into the plants and he saw dead animals being slaughtered. He saw filth all over the plant. He saw products going into sausage that shouldn't have been there. But more importantly, he came out of the plant radicalized by what happened to the workers, how they got chewed up the same way the food did.
Disfarçado de operário, Sinclair mergulhou num inferno moderno, onde a vida humana era incrivelmente barata. Durante sua mocidade, Sinclair partilhou algo muito importante com os imigrantes de Packingtown. Ele era extremamente pobre.
We never had but one room at a time, and I slept on a sofa or crossways at the foot of my parents' bed.
Ele nasceu em Baltimore em 1879, filho de uma família sulista que fora muito próspera. Seu pai era alcoólatra e vendia uísque e chapéus de palha. Sinclair cresceu em pensões baratas e passou sua infância vasculhando bares e até mesmo a sarjeta para poder levar seu pai bêbado para casa.
It was the highway of lost men, their faces gaunt with misery or bloated with disease. Often I hid my father's trousers to keep him at home.
And his father would be absolutely drunk, shivering with the effects of alcohol. It was a source of enormous shame for Sinclair as a child and I think as a man.
O escritor aprendeu rápido a diferença entre a riqueza e a pobreza. Os parentes de sua mãe eram ricos e seus pais o mandavam para as casas de campo deles para que passasse os verões.
All my life I was faced by the contrast between riches and poverty. One night I would be sleeping in a vermin-ridden sofa in a boarding house, and the next under silken coverlets.
Hardship, poverty, cold, and bed bugs. And bed bugs. He mentions this all the time in his autobiographical writings, that when I was a child and my father was trying to make a living in New York City and he was going from job to job and saloon to saloon, we're also going from boarding house to boarding house. And the thing I remember were the bed bugs, always the bed bugs.
Aha! Embora sua família fosse pobre, a imaginação do garoto era muito rica. Aos 15 anos, ele fugiu para Nova York e se sustentava vendendo romances baratos sobre as aventuras dos cadetes em West Point. Nos fins de semana, o adolescente extraordinário ia para o campo para um descanso de suas proezas sobre-humanas de escritor.
In an 18-month period, he produced over 1.2 million words of such stories. He was obsessed with writing. He saw writing as a way out of his conditions.
Mas será que ele iria evoluir e escrever livros que pudesse admirar? A resposta veio em uma visão mística, na qual ele se encontrou com um trio incomum. Seus heróis: o poeta Shelley, Hamlet e Jesus.
And a trembling seized me, a dizziness, a happiness so intense. Yet I knew what was happening. I knew that this was literature. And if I could set it down on paper, it would be read.
And he's incredibly excited about this experience. Except I would think that incredible joy that he took in those moments, in what he called ecstasy, were a reflection of an enormous amount of unhappiness elsewhere in his life.
Visão ou alucinação. Isso ajudou o rapaz a enterrar seu passado e partir em busca de um futuro promissor. Sinclair iria desbravar o caminho para a defesa do consumidor em todos os lugares. Os norte-americanos vivem uma época de paixão arrebatadora pela carne. 99% dos norte-americanos são carnívoros e consomem em média 2 vezes o seu peso em carne todos os anos.
We forget that in the 19th century, meat became a production industry and became industrialized, taken out of the home and taken into the factories.
A carne enlatada foi uma experiência de conveniência e de catástrofe. Por volta de 1900, durante a Guerra Hispano-Americana, cerca de 1.000 homens morreram devido à carne contaminada. Isso é quase 3 vezes mais do que o número de mortes causadas pelos espanhóis. Antes que A Selva fosse publicado em 1906, mortes relacionadas ao consumo de carne eram consideradas um fato natural da vida.
I think the name of the game is always be vigilant. Because if you take a look at all of the time between his book and today, you see the same kind of problems are popping up over and over again in the meat industry. It's an industry that, if you're not totally monitoring, will commit abuses. We like to think that it's all taken care of by the USDA and the FDA. The bottom line, it isn't.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, there are 76 million cases of food poisoning in the United States every year, 332,000 hospitalizations, and 5,000 deaths.
A maior parte das mortes é causada por uma bactéria chamada Escherichia coli 0157H7. Ela se origina nas fezes dos animais. O gado a leva para os matadouros. Ali, ela penetra na carne.
After the E. coli 0157H7 deaths in 1993, we were joined by parents of children who died.
He died. His insides shredded, his brain liquefied from a pathogen called E. coli 0157H7 that I can only describe as evil.
And when they told their stories, we found that the Congress was willing to listen in a way that they never listened to us before.
No dia 19 de julho de 1993, Alex Donnelly, de 6 anos, morreu depois de ter comido um hambúrguer preparado pela sua mãe. A carne estava infectada com Escherichia coli 0157H7.
I miss him, I think of him, I grieve for him every single day. Not a day goes by that I don't want to just get in a fetal position in a corner and just tell the world to go away and leave me alone. I still don't believe that this happened, that this continues to happen. And it's going to happen every day to somebody else.
Food safety is a shared responsibility. It's got to start with the people who are growing the crops or raising the animals. The people who sell the product through a restaurant or through a grocery store have a responsibility to keep their facilities clean. And then the final food preparer has a responsibility to make sure that they cook foods properly. I wish we could give a 100% guarantee. Even an operating room can't give you a 100% guarantee that some germ from somewhere doesn't contaminate something.
I get really angry when someone tells me it can't be done. That's nonsense. It's just not true. I get fighting mad when their argument is put in place that, oh, it might put the smaller businesses out of business. It's going to be too costly. If you can't do it right, get out of business altogether.
Obrigar a indústria da carne a fazer tudo direito era a missão de Upton Sinclair há quase um século. Ele conseguiu isso depois de se disfarçar de operário e se infiltrar nas indústrias de carne de Chicago. Foi uma coisa arriscada, mas as circunstâncias de sua própria vida pediam medidas desesperadas. A carreira de romancista de Sinclair não estava nada bem e ele mal se sustentava. Ele abandonara a ficção adolescente e passara a escrever sobre o amor e as batalhas dos artistas num mundo de indiferença. Ele publicou estes livros sozinho, depois de uma sequência de rejeições.
It was my idea at this time that the human race was to be saved by poetry.
Entretanto, em casa, em uma cabana pobre, o escritor não conseguia se salvar. Ele tinha se casado e tinha tido um filho com uma mulher que ele descrevia como quieta, subdesenvolvida e infeliz. Nós nos olhávamos, ele escreveu, através de um abismo de incompreensão. Escrever A Selva não foi ideia de Sinclair. Ele publicara um artigo num jornal socialista, Apelo à Razão, sobre uma greve de trabalhadores em Chicago. O jornal pediu-lhe que voltasse, pesquisasse e escrevesse um livro sobre a escravidão dos salários na indústria da carne. Disfarçado de operário, Sinclair encontrou na vida real os personagens que retrataria em A Selva.
You know, one of the luckiest things that ever happened to Sinclair was that when he visited Packingtown in the fall of 1904, somehow he stumbled into a Lithuanian wedding feast. He was fascinated with the people who were there, with how they looked, with the music, and he made it the material of the jungle. Smart choice.
Agora, ano se passou na vida dos recém-casados de Sinclair. Ona e Jurgis têm um filho. Porém, logo após o seu nascimento, um desastre acontece. O pai de Jurgis, Eitanas, adoece por trabalhar numa fábrica úmida e fria. Ele morre. Jurgis mal tem tempo de enlutar. Ele escorrega num chão cheio de sangue no matadouro. Mandado para casa com um tornozelo torcido, ele perde seu emprego. Agora, ele se tornou um produto de segunda mão, danificado. Eles não o querem mais. As forças de Jurgis se esvaem, e com ela a inocência de Ona. Ona conta a Marija que se entregou a seu chefe, um homem chamado Connor.
With Jurgis lame, I didn't know what to do. We'd lose the house without money coming in. I knew what Connor wanted, but I got myself believing it was just work. Special work, so we wouldn't lose the house.
Ona fica grávida e não consegue esconder a verdade de Jurgis. Louco de raiva, o operário ataca o chefe de Ona e é mandado para a prisão. Sem emprego e atrás das grades, Jurgis se rende ao desespero. Chicago o derrotou. Ele não imagina que o pior ainda está por vir.
What was the world of work like in industrial America at the time that Sinclair wrote The Jungle? Well, he told you what it was like. It was a jungle. It was beast eating beast.
Hoje, Chicago tem pouco em comum com a cidade infernal descrita em A Selva. Seu negócio agora é o mercado econômico e não mais o gado. Sinclair não mais reconheceria o bairro que já foi conhecido como Packingtown, ou as empresas de processamento como a Chicago Meat Authority. Esta empresa fornece cortes especiais de carne para restaurantes e buffets. O saneamento daqui é exemplar, muito acima das exigências legais. Muito antes do governo exigir exames para a detecção de bactérias perigosas, a CMA já tinha construído um laboratório e contratado técnicos. A CMA é um modelo para indústrias de carne em todo o mundo, melhor em todos os aspectos que as indústrias em A Selva. Algumas, entretanto, não são muito diferentes. O problema de Stuart Alexander começou em 1999. Inspetores federais e do estado da Califórnia descobriram que uma fábrica de linguiças em San Leandro não estava cozinhando bem a carne que era rotulada como completamente cozida.
Federal inspectors have the power to withdraw inspection and shut a plant down. The inspectors came in, told the plant owner that he needed to raise the temperature in his ovens, cooking his sausage. He took exception to that. They left the plant because they couldn't get it worked out with him. The plant was closed.
Porém, Alexander reabriu sua fábrica e continuou a vender linguiças aos mercados locais. No dia 21 de junho, 4 inspetores foram ao local.
And they were met at the door by this man with a gun.
And shots were fired. We came to the scene within 2 or 3 minutes. Our officers were here. The facility was locked. We looked through a window and were able to see one person down. We looked through another window and were able to see 2 other people down.
Alexander atirou em 3 dos inspetores e perseguiu o quarto pela rua. Segundo a polícia, o fabricante de linguiças voltou para a fábrica e deu um tiro fatal na cabeça da inspetora Jean Hiller, já ferida.
The killing of federal inspectors is unusual. Harassment, physical and mental harassment of inspectors is not unusual.
The physical violence and death that occurred absolutely shocked both the industry and the government. There are too many avenues for conflict resolution for both the government and the industry for things to have gotten to that point.
No inverno de 1905, o romance de Sinclair tomou forma em sua mente. Agora ele só tinha de escrevê-lo. Nesse meio tempo, assim como os imigrantes fictícios, sua família real vivia à margem da existência.
I wrote with tears and anguish, pouring into the pages all that pain which life had meant to me. Did I wish to know how the poor suffered in wintertime in Chicago? I had only to recall the winter in the cabin, when we had only cotton blankets and had put rugs on top of us. Externally, the story had to do with a family of stockyard workers. Internally, it was the story of my own family.
Após deixar a prisão, o herói da história, Jurgis Rudicus, mergulha em novos problemas. Seu maior medo se tornou realidade. O banco tomou-lhe a casa. Depois ele encontra Ona e Marija em uma pensão imunda. Ona tem um trabalho de parto difícil. A criança nasce morta. A experiência penosa mata Ona. Pouco depois, a última gota d'água. O filho de Jurgis cai em um buraco numa calçada e se afoga em uma água imunda. Desesperado, o operário abandona Chicago e os membros remanescentes de sua família.
What Sinclair's really done is to sort of roll up a lot of different tragedies into the life of one family. That's probably unrealistic for that amount of tragedy to occur within one family. For these types of situations to develop in a community like Packingtown in one or another family was actually quite common.
It created this traditional, naturalistic, deterministic story in which human beings, just like the animals that are pulled up the chute in the packing plants, and they are pulled up with this sense of optimism at the beginning, this idea of going to America, becoming successful, leaving behind the problems of Europe, and then they go down just like the animals, and they are processed too.
Com a publicação de A Selva, em 1906, os problemas de Upton Sinclair terminaram milagrosamente. Seu editor divulgou que o livro trataria das violações sanitárias e não dos apuros dos pobres como Sinclair tensionava. O escritor fez objeções, mas não muitas. Depois de passar sua vida pobre e rejeitado, ele tinha obtido sucesso. O New York Evening World escreveu: desde que Byron acordou para a fama uma manhã, não surgia um exemplo de fama mundial adquirida tão rapidamente como a obtida por Upton Sinclair.
The Jungle made Sinclair. It verified his sense of himself. It gave him an audience. It gave him some money to do his work.
Let me say that the public's reaction at that point was, my God, this is not good for our health.
O clamor do público provocado por A Selva obrigou o Congresso a aprovar o decreto de inspeção da carne em 1906. Porém, para Sinclair, isto não era suficiente. Ele declarou uma guerra particular contra a carne e inundou jornais americanos com editoriais exigindo reformas. Leis federais foram aprovadas na esteira de A Selva, proibindo que as indústrias adicionassem recheios e impurezas à carne. Eles puseram inspetores em todas as indústrias de carne americanas. Se eles não gostassem da aparência, do cheiro ou da textura da carne, eles não dariam o selo azul de aprovação do governo.
It's called organoleptic inspection. They looked for filth, they looked for illnesses, disease in the animals. It's referred to as the poke and sniff, because that's largely what they were restricted to.
The old meat inspection system was really designed to prevent sick animals from getting into the food supply. And it did a terrific job. We have the healthiest supply of animals in this country ever. We set the standard for the world.
The problem is that you can't see the things that make people sick. You can't see a chemical residue. You can't see bacteria. The National Academy of Sciences in 1985 said there is no scientific basis for the nation's meat inspection system.
So USDA and the industry and consumer groups and scientists put together a new inspection system that takes the best of the old program and adds some new components to prevent germs from moving downstream to the consumer.
Para detectar a carne perigosa antes que seja consumida, técnicos usam a ciência, não apenas seus sentidos. Porém, o novo sistema não impediu uma tragédia em 1998, quando 21 norte-americanos morreram depois de comerem salsichas Ballpark e outros produtos de carne da empresa Sara Lee.
This is product that goes out that says ready to eat, and it has on it a stamp that says USDA inspected, and it says sell by a certain date. So in 3 ways, it says to the public, it's safe to take this out of the package and eat it, and yet it wasn't safe.
Os Centros de Controle de Doenças fizeram um alerta. Num período de 3 meses, eles investigaram mortes misteriosas em vários estados. Finalmente descobriram a causa: aparelhos de ar-condicionado defeituosos em uma fábrica como esta. As unidades eram um foco de proliferação de uma toxina mortal chamada listeria.
Listeria is very interesting because it doesn't behave like a normal germ. It grows under refrigeration, and it lives everywhere. It's probably in this room right now. It's definitely in your refrigerator at home.
Cases are rare, but if you come down with listeriosis, it is a very serious illness.
A Sara Lee retirou imediatamente seus produtos do mercado, 16 milhões de quilos de salsicha e de frios. Porém, a medida só se aplicou às revendas. E o anúncio da Sara Lee ao público não citava as mortes. As pessoas continuaram a consumir seus produtos e a morrer. 30 dias depois da retirada, o Departamento de Agricultura dos Estados Unidos finalmente emitiu um alerta.
USDA did not act vigorously enough to get the Sara Lee product off the market. Now, people like Ballpark Franks have a huge investment in their good name. It's a good company. You would expect that they would have taken very, very vigorous action.
21 pessoas morreram e mais de 100 ficaram doentes. Muitas famílias de vítimas processaram a Sara Lee. Apesar de tudo, a empresa recuperou 90% de seus clientes. Assombrado pela tragédia, Jurgis, o herói de A Selva, foge de Chicago. Longe da tormenta de Packingtown, ele trabalha em fazendas e vive entre migrantes. No campo, Jurgis recupera sua força, mas seu espírito continua profundamente ferido. O fim da temporada de colheita leva o herói de Sinclair de volta a Chicago, onde ele passa por uma sucessão de empregos. Mas não importa o que ele faça, os salários são baixos, as condições são terríveis, uma verdadeira escravidão. O sofrimento de Jurgis é um tema com o qual Sinclair esperava atingir o coração dos norte-americanos. Para o escritor, um vegetariano convicto, os problemas da carne não importavam tanto. O que realmente o interessava era o sofrimento de homens e mulheres e as crianças que morriam de fome. Era uma desgraça norte-americana.
There can be no soul life for any man, so long as men, women, and little children are chained up to toil and perish in misery.
One of the things that Sinclair got wrong is presenting these people as kind of atoms floating around in this chaotic situation of Packingtown. In reality, these people had quite a bit of support. For example, this is a deeply religious community. I mean, churches are probably the most important cultural and social institutions in a place like Packingtown.
The Old Testament prophets took to the steps of the temple to scream out about the economic injustices, and that's precisely what Upton Sinclair represents to me, a voice that was speaking out to call into question and to call into light, bringing to light that which the American public doesn't know much about, and that is, it was the condition in those days around the slaughter of beef and the injustice around it. What we need today is for that light to turn on in terms of poultry.
O reverendo Jim Lewis dirige a Aliança pela Justiça da Carne de Aves em Georgetown, Delaware. Há 10 anos ele tenta melhorar a vida dos criadores de aves e dos operários das indústrias. O problema? Frangos grandes. Gigantes da indústria cujas políticas mantêm a criação de frangos em uma situação retrógrada.
It's called corporate agribusiness. It's called factory farming. And it's full of all kinds of problems. Once upon a time, they used to advertise, come on over here and live on the good Eastern Shore, land of pleasant living. Part-time work, full-time pay, chickens. What's true, in fact, is that with a farmer, they are going under right and left here. Those growers never own those chickens. Chickens are always owned by the company, unless, of course, the chicken dies, and then the chicken belongs to the farmer. The farmer really raises those chickens until they're ready to go to the process plant, and that's where they are slaughtered and processed and packaged, all owned by the company.
Numa instalação muito parecida com a de A Selva, os operários sofrem 4 vezes mais ferimentos do que a média nacional. Trabalhar aqui é mais perigoso do que em uma mina de carvão. 1 em cada 6 empregados se fere durante o primeiro ano de trabalho.
Birds are flying around on hooks, illegally up to 90 birds a minute. And people standing in water, temperatures in the 40s, lots of fecal material and water in the air, and doing repetitive jobs over and over and over again along the line. For example, cutting better than 10,000 birds a day, deboning those birds, or pulling the guts out of 15,000 pieces of chicken that fly by them on the line. And maybe a 30 or 40-minute break for lunch, out of which they get out of all their gear and eat their lunch, go to the bathroom, and have to get back on the line. And most of them no break in the afternoon. It's terribly hard work.
Muitos imigrantes vieram para Georgetown para conseguir este trabalho. Assim como Jurgis Rudkus, eles chegam com grandes esperanças. E assim como Jurgis, muitos acabam se ferindo.
Sí, es un trabajo muy difícil. Es un trabajo difícil porque la línea va rápido, ¿verdad? Y uno agarra la ala así y luego le hace el corte, va para que no quede mucha carne. Y con el jalón que se hace, pues duele la mano. Que no está bien o pues uno está hablando por lo que uno está haciendo, uno quiere defenderse, lo que hacen es correrlo a uno, ¿verdad? Entonces, pues no podemos hacer nada.
This industry is full of fear. If they speak up, they could find themselves on the way back. Compliments of the Immigration Naturalization Service. When people are desperate, lost hope, no place to go to have anyone advocate for and with them, where they feel totally helpless, they're living in hell. That's hell. That's my definition of hell.
Inferno é onde o herói de A Selva, Jurgis, se encontra quando volta à cidade que destruiu a sua família. Mais uma vez em Chicago, Jurgis descobre que Marija, a prima de Ona, mudou de vida.
Come on, big fella, don't let the cold in. Don't let that smell in. Hush. How do you know he isn't a banker in disguise?
It's a pretty thick disguise.
Or maybe he's the mayor.
Or the clergy.
Well, whoever he is, Father Aroma forgot his money. Good night, Father.
Marija! Marija. Are the rest of the people alive?
Yes, and they all live not far from here. They are all fine now, Jurgis.
O reencontro deles é triste. Marija tornou-se uma prostituta.
At least we survive, and you would not blame.
Em poucas palavras, ela resume o apelo dos escravos remunerados em um sistema impiedoso.
When people are starving, and someone has something worth a price, they should sell it, I say.
Prostitution was very common in a city like Chicago, and a lot of the people that turned to that as a way to get by were poor women like Marija that were not able to make it as wage earners. Sinclair tries to show the corruption of individuals in the novel, good people, people who started out early in the story as very positive characters, and I think Marija probably represents that about as well as any character in the novel. This is a very solid person, but her experience, not only in industry, but also her relationships with people over a period of time, for Sinclair, sort of destroys her in a moral sense.
Tonight in Chicago, there are 1,000 mothers living in misery and squalor, selling their bodies in order to feed their little ones. There are a million people.
Buscando o abrigo do frio, Jurgis entra em uma reunião. O orador conta uma história de sofrimento muito parecida com a de Jurgis.
Or will you, with the rage and fury of the wrongs committed against you, find your voice? Will you say no? And will your comrade beside you also say no? And the voice of labor, the voice of a mighty stirring giant, will crush the system with one word. No! 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 Ladies and gentlemen, this is the voice of the oppressed pronouncing the doom of oppression.
A Ordem é uma organização socialista. Nos dias subsequentes, Jurgis se envolve com um grupo de líderes socialistas. Eles arrumam um emprego para ele. E logo ele ousa sonhar com um futuro.
Sinclair had trouble finishing The Jungle. The only time that Sinclair really had difficulty finishing a writing project that he started was The Jungle. After he leads his characters to their demise, after Jurgis's wife Ona dies, after his son drowns in the street in front of his house, he doesn't know what to do with his story.
Em vez de dar à história de Jurgis uma conclusão dramática, Sinclair ficou indeciso. Ele escreveu 4 finais para o romance. No fim, ele fez seu herói sofredor tornar-se um socialista.
While Sinclair may have been interested in a worker's utopia, he really didn't know how to get to that utopia.
A lot of the problems that we're looking at in The Jungle are addressed over a period of time, but they're not solved by brilliant young socialist writers like Upton Sinclair. The solutions emerged from Packingtown itself through unionization, through community organizing, and actually through supporting one another on a day-to-day kind of a basis.
He didn't know how socialism was going to work, but in the last words of that novel, he knew Chicago will be ours, that socialism somehow would triumph.
Mas não foi assim. Os operários de Packingtown lutariam por décadas para conseguirem um salário justo e uma vida decente para suas famílias. E Sinclair se manteria fiel às ideias socialistas que nunca prevaleceriam. H.I. Macon escreveu:
I find your note on my return from Europe
as always, you are right, save in matters of politics, sociology, religion, literature, economics, and the exact sciences.
Pensadores de destaque como Macon e celebridades como Charlie Chaplin agora faziam parte do universo de Sinclair. Ele continuou a ser popular até o fim de sua vida. Chegou até a concorrer ao governo da Califórnia.
We are going forward to show the way and to bring back prosperity and safety to our whole country.
Até sua morte em 1990, Sinclair publicou quase 100 livros. Mas seus trabalhos posteriores não chegariam aos pés do livro que o tornou famoso.
I really see Upton Sinclair as a prophet. He was telling the truth to people so that they would be able to make change. He was calling into question the way business was done.
What The Jungle did is it raised enough awareness that a national inspection system resulted.
It was a microcosm, a look at the 20th century as it was unfolding and all the different battle lines between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. And in that sense, it's an enduring classic.
A Selva serviu de exemplo para o século que nascia. O livro resgatou Sinclair de sua juventude sofrida e ajudou os Estados Unidos a encararem sua própria dor crescente. Versão brasileira, Clone.